when I talk about new work, I'm sure whatever interpretation I have of it today will change in the next year and years to come. So I will start by saying, Hamatakiapi, Ampetu Washte, Suzanne Kite Machapi Kushto, Oglala Hamacha, Chante Washte, Na Pechiuzapo. My relatives, I shake your hands with a happy heart, and I'm grateful to get to have shown this experimental work and get to make it. It's rare to be able to make interesting commissions, and I'm glad to be able to make work in Tulsa about this subject. So I think for the sake of the documentation, I'll give a brief career trajectory towards this. I will also apologize for however I talk about myself today, because I just finished a draft of my PhD today and my brain is like a bucket of mush. Thank you. That's what I want. That's what I needed. I needed like a lot of clapping when I finished. I was like, so close. Another month. And so this work is not in the periphery of my PhD, but it of course comes from like basically a decade of research towards this kind of thinking. So I'll start by saying that my history as an artist is as a violinist and a composer, and my interest in technology has mostly to do with music technology and the creation of body interfaces for music and video performance. So that means wearing microcontroller, very small computers on the body that control sound and video. And in the process of doing that research, I've started to use machine learning and artificial intelligence as just another tool in the toolkit to try to talk through philosophical questions that I'm thinking about. So in the process of this piece, I think that there are two strains that I generally divide my artistic work, and all of my work is a really strong relationship to research and scholarship, and then the work comes from that. So I usually have two strains. One is like a generative strain, so where I'm looking at tools or subjects and trying to ask myself what is the Lakota way of doing this? What kind of Lakota philosophies can create something good? And then there's a strain which I try to generally separate from that, which is of critique. And so I would consider this set of works critique. So I'm looking at a subject and I'm asking myself what I don't like about it. So for example, because this is in the realm of the artificial intelligence works that I make, since it uses a lot of AI in the process. Usually when I think about making new work, it's a question of ethics. So most of my process is research into ethics and defining for myself what is a good way of making art. But in this case, I'm asking, like, basically, what are the ethics of hunting on a very basic level, and what is the difference between the ethics of hunting in indigenous communities versus non-indigenous communities? So the inspiration from this work actually came from, and I read lots of it last week at the experimental lecture I did. But most of the performance drew on a bunch of research that had to do with animism. So in my PhD, which goes through animism, I read a text by Philippe Descola. It's called Beyond Nature and Culture. And there was a few pages in there that went very deeply into the question of hunting relationships. So by relationships, these are actually familial relationships. So I think when you get into anthropology, what becomes clear is the way that categorization works in certain realms of anthropology are dealing with hierarchies and family structure. So like many important parts of human life, a really important one is how we are related to the things that have to give us sustenance. And so for a lot of the examples in this Descola text, they have to do with how you're setting up your relationship to, from hunter to hunted. And so those examples went over hunting relationships that were like you're hunting your cousin. It's a cousin relationship. You're hunting your brother-in-law. There's a lot of like brother-in-law relationships. And hunting a lover. I really like the example where it's you're hunting you need to woo the daughter of the king of the forest. So that means you need to have good offerings for the king of the forest in order to be successful. And another good one is the example of an Inuit culture that understands that it's souls from the community that end up in the souls of the hunted. And so it's a precarious situation. And I think that all of those things come from what Jim Chaney calls bioregional ethics, where the ethics of your relationship with something springs from that bioregion. And, but not to be, I don't want that to be flattened to just a relationship with land, because land and cosmos are like so much bigger than just physical land. It's all of the extreme interconnections between them. So from that comes the relationships, and familiar relationships, whatever they are. And because of those familiar relationships, they're able to be such ethical considerations that Vine Deloria Jr. would call covenants. And covenants are, for example, like when the Lakota people emerge from from the wind cave, we had to make a covenant with being that took pity on us, the bison, who said, we pity you, you can't even take care of yourselves or clothe yourselves, but you've been tricked out of the ground by Iktomi. So you're tricked, so we'll help you. We'll give up our lives endlessly as long as you hold up your end of the bargain to take care of the earth. And I would say that some claim that that bargain isn't being upheld, so that's why the bison don't help us as much anymore. So when you have this, but that's a covenant between two peoples, two nations, Buffalo Nation and the Lakota Nation. And you know, a lot of Lakota culture is based on looking at non-human beings, both seen and unseen, physical, non-physical, animal, spirit, etc., and saying this is how they organize their lives, so this is how we're going to organize ours. Because we can see that that is an ethical way of doing things, the way the non-humans conduct themselves, so we will try to act accordingly. Okay, all of that to say, that's not the case in Western hunting culture. So by Western, I mean like Western European, post-Enlightenment, hunting traditions that come from England, and then what bleeds into the hunting traditions of contemporary, like white settler America today. So, so in the film, that's basically what I'm documenting. I wanted to go find that some of the more of a hunting video games, but I didn't have time to do that, so I just settled for Bass Pro and every single angle of the Bass Pro Shop. But there happened to be a giant game in there to play. And I think that when I take these two streams, I don't want to do a compare and contrast. That's not interesting to me. I want to say that there is. I want to focus in and try to clarify what I'm talking about through the artwork, to help myself clarify what the heck I mean. So in this process, I read more, did more research. I think that in the process of working on this piece, I also discovered that I am, a lot of my conceptions of hunting come from upstate New York, from the time I spent at Bard College. And in place like upstate New York, the relationship with deer is really interesting to me. There is the place where Bard is located is Dutchess County, which is the highest rate of Lyme disease, I think, in the world. And basically everybody I knew either had it, or if they stayed there long enough was going to get it. And this disease, which comes from ticks that bite deer and is spread that way, to me is more than like not even a metaphor. It's just a reality of environmental destruction. So, but in upstate New York, the environmental destruction starts so early on and the Dutch colonization of that area removed and genocided indigenous people so early on that the environment there is experiencing such collapse as to have this disease spread. And so I think that's inevitable wherever you go in the world where colonialism destroys the relationship between humans and land. You're going to end up having things like disease and destruction. So, but that's not to say that hunting is the cause of that. No, I mean we know that from environmentalism that there are aspects, many aspects of hunting where hunting is helpful and then balances populations, but it's just kind of like a very late in the game trying to help something that's already in extreme destruction mode. So, okay, back to this piece. So I do this research, and what becomes clear, and it's so easy to find the opposite of these positive kind of interesting family connection hierarchy found in indigenous cultures. It's fairly easy to find the opposite. And what I noticed was a lot of the hunting culture, American hunting culture, it has to do with hetero, violent sexual urges. And quick search in Google Scholar returned a lot of information on that. And I read those out loud in the other lecture, but and we know that the relationship between like the gun and the idea of male power, those are all easily intertwined. But in this piece, I just wanted to dump as many of the things that I found, as disturbing as they were, and some of them were extremely disturbing, into something that's quick cut and relies on an AI. So now I'll get into the AI stuff for this piece. So this piece is, originally I was going to do a thing where it spat out new video using StyleGAN, but then I decided that the video was good enough on its own. I don't need to over process anything. But what I did do on this is the text is kind of the artwork to me that's plain, and the relationship between the text and the video. So the text is anytime I would collect research texts or stories. My assistant Bettina even found a lot of like pornographic text stories about deers and like men and deers. Once we got all that, we were able to feed that and the scholarship and critiques of it, and like Ted Nugent's take on how all of his like sexual urges towards deer and sheep, etc. We all put that into the AI, and so with the process that works with the this type of AI is you take the text, you have the entire text of the internet, like millions of pieces of text, that it's already trained on, a model's trained on. And then you filter that model and you train it more through a condensed set of texts. So those are my condensed set of texts. So then it learned what I wanted it to talk about. And AI text is very simple right now. It has no brain of its own. It's not using logic, it's using statistics. It's statistically deciding what the most statistically likely next word is. So I was going to read some of it. Right now it's Ted Nugent wanting to shoot a sheep, and he's so excited. So once I figured that out, I was able to kind of make this poetic collaboration with the AI, even though the AI has no say in what's happening or not happening, and then set it to the video. Okay, so then let me move to some other pieces. So in the process of doing this, I wanted to work with taxidermy for a while, and I really am disturbed by taxidermy, like most people are, unless they're interested in buying it or making it, or have it in their homes, because it can be so badly done, and it's so common to see bad taxidermies, and I'd seen them before. But in working on this, I was wanting to figure out how the preservation, like museum preservation is a whole discussion in Indigenous art and Indigenous contemporary art. A lot of Indigenous contemporary artists work to kind of speak against the kind of preservation that's been done in museums of Indigenous objects. And so those objects are usually, they're very often stolen objects that are like slowly in some sort of limbo process of being returned to tribes, or they haven't been started in some museums. But a lot of the times, artifacts that have been stolen, or they were just gift objects that were collected by the museum are preserved in formaldehyde, therefore making them like poisonous to touch. And in thinking about that, the idea of the preservation of things forever, that artwork should be forever, and that nothing should have a death cycle, and everything should be made of plastic. Even the idea of an animal is so beautiful that you'd want to have it never ever die and be constant forever. It's similar to the way we treat dead bodies in American culture, where they have to be like filled with preservatives and not allowed to like decay naturally, as opposed to like Lakota culture, where you put a body on a platform out on the plains. And so in that process, like, okay, I think the right thing to do for this piece is to pair the video with the perfect preservation, a perfect example of obsession with killing paired with preservation, because in order to control something, this Western philosophy of ownership and control, because of the lack of understanding that non-humans are beings as well, comes out for me in taxidermy. It's dead, it's controlled, it'll never leave, it's there forever. So I went online and I was looking at taxidermies, and I found this one, which was perfect because it is so badly done. It is horrific to look at. The tongue is messed up. There were bugs on it when I got it. It's on some sort of like sloppily created platform that's painted. All the plants on it are definitely from the dollar store. It's clear to me that this animal was found, had it starved in the woods. Maybe its mother was killed, or it got lost or something, or maybe they tried to care for it, and you know, who knows what kind of horrific death this thing had. But you know, it's just a baby, it's licking its foot, and whoever decided to try their hand at taxidermy and then decided it was a good idea to sell is nuts. But I'm sure I made their day by giving them money for it. I'm sure nobody else would have, because it's insane. And it's disturbing, and it's kind of, but from afar away, it's kind of cute, but I think it's perfect. It perfectly mirrors what I'm talking about in this exploration of Western hunting ontology. And ontology is the definition of who, for me, I work with the definition that it's who gets to be a being, who is allowed beinghood. And plants and animals are not allowed beinghood. Land isn't allowed beinghood. In Western culture, we've seen the not allowing women to be full beings, not allowing brown people to be full beings, and Native people to be full beings. So when you have that kind of disintegration of beinghood, where only the white male can have full beinghood, of course, a little baby deer is going to not qualify. So in this process, I then was like, okay, I really want to make something with my hands. And I thought that there was something texturally like putrid about this, all of this, this subject matter, and also this like I was like feeling this idea of like holes and like rotting holes, and the kind of like vacuousness of the dead deer, and I wanted to make a piece where there was a hide, where there was an opening where kind of a beaded rot was coming through, where the beads are just like kind of the inner parts, like of the kind of like the indigenous parts of things, but they're sick because of the way they've been treated. And so what I did was I just printed out a few examples of Petri dishes full of really colorful molds. And these molds I just beaded like it was bead by numbers sort of thing. And I've kind of played with different textures, and I really like to do this. I like to embrace my skill level where it's at. So my skill with beading is like, I really cannot do the super beautiful flat beadwork that some people are really, really good at. And instead of trying, I do that sometimes, but in sort of trying to do that, I decided just to embrace the type of beadwork I've done before, where it looks like ridges and mounds, and it looks like it's growing, and that's what I went for. And the hide, I didn't get it somewhere special. I just found it online as well, to match the deer, and I thought it was great because it was a damaged hide, so it was because it had this hole in it. And this hole ended up being the perfect size for the finished beadwork. So, yeah, and I guess I'll talk about the title. So the title of the taxidermy deer is Iata Kunipi Kdeshni, they will come to nothing. Kind of like this kind of vacuous void that I feel about this deer's body. And then the hide sculpture is a hui ayapi, and I think it's rot and decay. And then finally, deer fucker, which is basically what I think about all of the massive number of very strange people who decided to share that online. I think in the process of doing this, it clarified for me what my feelings about hunting are, which generally it's just, there's nothing wrong with hunting, just like there's nothing wrong with many things in this world. And there's nothing wrong with a gun, just as it's just an object. But when things are put in context, it's the desire to do this sort of sport and to not have any limits on the weird level of pleasure one takes from it, to not have any criticality or examination of that is what is deeply disturbing. So when you have this as a pastime and not as a sacred covenant between one being and another being, that's when you end up with, it's not the cause of some cultural thing. It doesn't cause anything else. Like violent video games don't cause violence. They're just symptoms of deeper problems. And to me, those are signs of deeper ontological problems of who is allowed beinghood. And then from that, when you don't allow anyone else beinghood, you end up with the kind of the world that we have to live in today. So, you know, when I decided to, you know, create this sculpture around this, first I was going to go for like a supernatural, not supernatural, but a very natural looking facade to place the video in. But then I actually wanted to match the extreme shittiness of the the taxidermy deers stand, and I don't even think I can be as flagrantly bad as those people who made that, but I tried. And yeah, I think that's kind of what I want to say about it.